Namaste. Welcome to another podcast of D-Life. D-Life.in is the oldest, largest, and the only award-winning low-carb platform in India. D-Life.in was founded by Anup Singh, an engineer and a silver medalist from the distinguished IIT Roorkee in India. Anup was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in February 2011, but has been living a pill-free life for close to 13 years now. It was Anup who pioneered the idea of 100 grams carbs per day on a low-carb diet for Indians for diabetes remission, which changed the scenario for diabetics in India. Founded in 2014, D-Life now has 3,000 plus combined success stories in remission of diabetes and other metabolic diseases. And with 1,200 plus Indian recipes, D-Life is India's largest low-carb platform. D-Life has since been reviewed by low-carb stalwarts of the world like Dr. Gary Fetke, Dr. David Unwin, Professor Tim Noakes, and others, who also use the resources available on DLife.in for their Indian and Asian origin patients. In 2021, Anup was conferred with the Icons of India Award for creating DLife.in platform by the prestigious The Outlook Group. Along with Shashikant Iyengar, Anup Singh organized India's first low-carb conference in October 2023 that saw 47 top global icons of low-carb on a single platform across a three-day mega event. I am Sanjay Bal Subramaniam, and I am proud to be associated with DLife.in. Today, I shall be hosting Sandesh Bhat for this podcast. He will be sharing his personal experience on combating SIBO, that is, Small Intestinal Bacterial Overgrowth. Welcome, Sandesh. Please give a brief on yourself before we dive into your combating of SIBO.
Hey, thanks, Sanjay. Thanks, everybody. Delighted to be on this platform, and I thank DLife for providing this opportunity. Very excited to be, sharing what I've learned in the last decade or so with regards to my gut health, and we'll look at one of the use case, which is my own use case, in the latter half of the presentation. All right. So what I will do is, I have some PowerPoint slides, so we can keep a flow, and I'll get started with that. And thereon, if Sanjay has any questions, feel free, Sanjay, to ask any questions that you would have in mind.
Okay.
All right. I'm sharing my screen right here. All right. So this is a this is a IBS SIBO case study. I'm calling it n equal to 1 because it's just me. That's the case. And what I will be talking through in the next few minutes is based on some disclaimers I wanted to call out. Not a doctor. I don't have any cure. All the information provided here is my personal experience. I'm not entitled to disclaim all responsibility to any person or entity for any liability or loss or damage caused by applying or interpreting anything I'm shared here. I would advise everybody to do your own research or speak to your doctor before taking any action. I do have some gratitude to share before we start. My life took a U-turn when I heard Dr. Pradeep Jamnadas's lecture on fasting for survival right in the middle of COVID. Of course, Dr. Jason Fung, Dr. Eric Berg, and Peter Osborne and his book, No Grain, No Pain. Cannot be complete without thanking DLife.in. It's been an amazing journey, amazing platform, amazing community of people that Shashi, Arun, Ira, and Anup have developed in this group. Further close from a SIBO and IBS perspective, Dr. Mark Pimentel, Dr. Alison Seebecker, Dr. Michael Ruscio, you'll see me refer to them quite a lot in the upcoming presentation. All right, what to expect, in the next 40 minutes is, we talk a lot about ingestion, taking food into the mouth, and that's a good thing. Everything starts from there. If you're not ingesting the right food, you have a problem right in the beginning of the domino effect. But what we don't talk much about is if you're ingesting well, how is digestion, absorption, assimilation, excretion progressing? And today's talk is most to do with those gray boxes that I have highlighted there. So basically what it means is, if you see my cursor here, It basically means below the pyloric valve. And we'll talk a little about that, what we call the lower GI, lower gastrointestine. All right, so let's get bloated for 40 minutes because that's how it was for me for 15 years before I kind of found some healing. 2005 to 2021, not so long ago, right? I mean, it's a long time. I faced a lot of gut challenges. Now, these are irritants. These are impacts your lifestyle. It not necessarily is a disease. So just want to call that out right off the offset. So in no specific order, I had whole milk intolerance, which I figured by a process of elimination. Milk coffee, milk tea causes excruciating brain fog that lasts 48 hours, which starts about 24 hours after consuming the milk tea of coffee. There are brain fog flare-ups some days, unexplained bloating. I won't read through all of it, but I've highlighted those in red, which was a severe problem for me. Urgency in the morning, not emptied bowel, inability to gain weight. I was very, very interested in putting on muscle, and I've been working out for the last 20 years, but the last pieces of muscle came up only the last 3 years or last 2 years when the SIBO was put into remission. So I'll talk through a little bit around that. But these are in general some of the symptoms I had for 15 years. Now, going ahead a little bit here, I wanted to share my gut-wrenching story. And how this, after all my learning, how this might have transpired, right? It's easy to retrospect all the time. So, I graduated from engineering, first job, obviously hostel, eating out. But here is the thing, I never ate processed food. Anything that came in a packet, I never would eat. I would never eat salads as well. I always loved cooked food. And I know I may not have avoided artificial colors, flavors, MSG back in the time. You're not so conscious as a college kid. So I'm sure I ate quite a bit of that knowingly or unknowingly. And now I feel that 2001 to 2005, I actually had a couple of food poisoning, acute gastroenteritis episodes. So it's quite possible that that was the time, when all of the SIBO would have begun based on the research I will share with you. And the gut wrenching story is I did everything possible at that time, although I had very meager sums of money at that time for abdominal ultrasound. I put tubes from the top, from the bottom, nothing was found. CBC was normal, CRP was normal. And I got a diagnosis from the mainstream saying it's in your head. I couldn't take it at all. Right from childhood, I've always been a very stress-free person. I take stress, but I handle stress pretty well. And I couldn't just figure out that I was so stressed. And the diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome was given to me. And then I was put on digestive enzymes. I was asked to quit whole milk. And I ran that way for a good 2006 to 2000, almost 12, when I, came across one of my own cousin brothers who is a homeopath, and he suggested that medicine that is called Kali Bike. And even today, I use it when I get those flare-ups because my remission is still at around 80 to 90%. But I couldn't get the root cause of it. So that's the background from 2001 to 2020. I'll fill the rest half of the pillars at the end. But this is something that I couldn't just figure, and it was not acceptable for me. And like everything has its own time. Life gives answers in three ways. This is my favorite quote. And the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. So I started off saying, hey, I don't know anything. Let me start reading about this. And COVID allowed me so much of that time, thankfully, to do reading. So that's where, I started reading about IBS, how it's diagnosed, how it is managed, thanks to, the search engines, thanks to PubMed and all the material that is available in social media. This is something I came across in my early time of reading, and this is called the Bristol stool chart. I know it is a very poopy, mushy thing for us to talk, but what I realized, and some of my seniors in my family also said, that everything begins in the gut, and your poop is an indicator of your health. That rang a bell for me for sure. And I came across this exactly, that there is something, that is captured about poop. So this is the Bristol stool chart. I don't think it is of much significance because the research now does not look at this much, but I still wanted to talk through it. And the Bristol stool chart, is used in combined with a set of criteria called Rome criteria, and Rome 1 was come up from a bunch of observational studies by a group of doctors and experts in this field from 1988 to 2017, which is when Rome 4 came in. And that's generally the criteria that is used for irritable bowel syndrome, which is IBS. And if you have a IBS, if your stool is type 1 or 2, you're labeled IBS C, which is IBS constipated. And if you're 6 or 7, you're labeled as IBS loose, or D, which is diarrhea. And you ideally want to be in type 3 or 4, right? So I had some good learnings from there. And then I further read to say, is the mainstream totally up to date? And this is the time I was, seeking for help. And what I understood is, yes, I mean, there is not much in this field that has come up in 2004, 5, or 6 at that time when I was looking for help. And this is, I don't want to drain through this slide, but on the table 2 in the cream box is basically all we have, when it comes to Rome criteria: improvement with defecation, onset associated with change in the frequency of stool, onset associated with change in the form of stool. This is an elimination criteria. So once the doctor has figured that everything else is normal, then we come this to a elimination diagnostic saying that it could be irritable bowel syndrome, and it's a cluster of symptoms. That's technically what we have to up until good 5 years back, I can say, and the mainstream is slowly coming to it with all the research that is becoming more public. And this is from some of the papers I pulled from the Rome criteria. I'm not going to read through it, but what's interesting, what you will observe here is excessive testing in patients with IBS systems who meet Rome criteria unlikely to uncover new diagnosis. So testing is not the solution. You will usually get a complete blood count normal. You probably see an absence of iron deficiency anemia or some signs of iron deficiency anemia. Your CRP will probably be normal. And what was interesting is I did a colonoscopy, and the paper actually says that colonoscopy did not change the diagnosis of IBS in 98.1% of the patient. And that makes it really tricky. There's no blood marker, there is no antibody marker, at least at this point in time. There is no scopes that you can use. So what do we do next, right? So here is an interesting thing. A low FODMAP diet was known to be healing for IBS back in the time itself. But what was not known is what was causing it. And there were gut-directed antibiotics such as rifaximin. I think 2002 or 3, it was available. However, after that, you will see that doctors would prescribe low-dose tricyclic antidepressant to slow MACE, and then it slows down the colonic transit, basically reduces the diarrhea. And then everything is a trial. Allocetrone, eluxidolamine, I don't know what these are, but I know they were medications, or a bile acid sequestrant to regulate the bile acid. And then finally, it looks pretty dangerous here: hypnotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, which I was not ready to agree on. So there is no confirmatory test, and most of it is a careful history is key to cost-effective diagnosis of IBS. Now, I got this diagnosis, but I was not feeling better. So what next, right? And after all the reading I did in the last 3 to 4 years, what we know is that IBS affects 1/4 of the world's population. That's significant. And 70% of IBS patients have SIBO. And this is, in the literature today, and Dr. Mark Pimentel and Alison Siebecker are the pioneers. So what we have to take away from this slide is, if you have irritable bowel syndrome, those 1 or 2, 1, 2, and the 6, 7 pattern in the Bristol tool chart, 70% of the time you can guesstimate, and I'm saying guess because in India we don't have a lot of tests for this even today. It is going to be 70% time, it is going to be small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So I want to deep dive a little bit, but we'll pause and check with Sanjay if he has any questions with regards to the IBS part of the presentation.
At the moment, I can only think of if a quarter of the world's population is suffering, and we still don't have too much of testing for all this, is pretty alarming.
Right, right. But I think there is hope because there is from the Cedars-Sinai Medical Research Institute, from where Dr. Mark Pimentel come. He's the pioneer in the research of small intestine bacterial overgrowth. I'm happy to say there is a lot of tests that's already available in the US and some parts of Europe, and it's probably a matter of time, right? 5 years, probably a decade max for India to see it as well. But my attempt in this presentation is to help you to figure out if you have SIBO even without the test. So if I'm able to do that, I'd call myself successful in this presentation. All right, I'll move on to the deep dive on SIBO because I know this is a new topic, and there's a lot of science involved in this. I try to digest that and made it very simple. So what is SIBO? SIBO is small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So it's a microbial dysbiosis. So it is research now that it is not in the head. I just want to outrightly clear that 70% of that number that you saw, it is a microbial dysbiosis. But it's not an infection. The overgrown bacteria aren't pathogenic. That's why I said I still lived a decent life for that 15 years, but it's still an irritant, right? You want to live life optimally. So the point here I wanted to make is the problem here is only about the location. Even if the good bacteria that you see in the picture here is in the wrong place, it is still a problem. Everybody has a place and point in time. And SIBO is caused by something else, but it has its own symptoms. So what's that something else? I will share with you, and it will connect back to the first few slides I talked about. Interesting thing is we all know that we have trillions of bacteria in the large intestine, and gas production there is normal in the large intestine, which is where the fermentation needs to take place. And in the small intestine, gas production is abnormal. So we should not have gas production in the small intestine because that's where most of the nutrient is absorbed. Here is a very beautiful picture of where we need to see the most bacteria, and what you will see is in the colon you need to see the highest number of friendly bacteria, and that's what you would see, bifidobacterium, which you see in the probiotics. And as you go up the chain, you see lesser and lesser bacteria. So this proportion should be maintained, and this is called the homeostasis of the microbiome. Dysbiosis is not an infection. I repeat, it is dysbiosis if it is in too many quantities, it's in the wrong location, or in the wrong proportion. And that's what dysbiosis of the small intestine microbiome means. Now, what's the big deal, right? I mean, okay, these gases are produced in the small intestine, which is not supposed to be produced. So what's the big deal? So what happens is in our stomach, especially in the small intestine, the bacterial fermentation of carbohydrates take place if there is too much of any bacteria. That balance is not there, right? We'll talk about that specific bacteria which has been discovered now. But basically, if you have small intestine bacterial overgrowth, there will be fermentation of carbohydrates because bacteria feeds on that carbohydrate, and as a residue or a waste product, they breathe out these gases. And what are these gases? These gases are hydrogen, which is one gas. The other one is hydrogen sulfide, which is a second gas, and the third one is methane. Methane is pretty toxic to the human body. So there are three gases and what we call three phenotypes. And in fact, now SIBO has also been called SIBO/IMO, and it is called intestinal methane overgrowth because methanogens are coming from archaea, like I said here, and it's not coming from bacteria. So now it is SIBO/IMO, but for the interest of this presentation, I will call it SIBO. So here is a great question. I've been educating my son also around, optimal gut health, thanks to the advent of so much processed food around. And the question he asked was, doesn't our evolution have mechanisms in place, protections in place to ensure that we are protected against bacteria? I think it's a great question, and we have, right? So these are the 7 mechanisms we have. Only if one or more of these protections fail, SIBO occurs. And what you see in the color coding is the orange is the biochemical protection, the green is the mechanical protection, basically valve system, and the black is cellular or nerve-related protection. that is there. And any of these break, or in one or more of this break, is when your propensity for SIBO increases. And on the right, you will see, the digestive system chart. And what I wanted to tell you is, today we are covering obviously the lower GI, but it right from the beginning, it starts right from conditions like H. pylori, which is right at the stomach, all the way down. So we know that low stomach acid can cause, H. pylori. So it is a domino effect. So I'm assuming right now, everything is good from the upper GI all the way to the, upper GI and the pyloric splinter, because my issues were mostly related to the lower GI, but there are upper GI cases as well when you have low stomach acid. All right, let's get into some science stuff here. The risk of post-infectious IBS, right? Basically, after you have a gastroenteritis, there was a summary paper that was published, which I was able to get hold of. And it's a systematic review and a meta-analysis, the best class research paper that you can see, right? And what was interesting is 11% of people, exposed, 1 in 9 experience food poisoning. You can go to this paper right here. You can take a picture also, and I have this at the end of the slide. But what the takeaway basically is that there is consensus now that food poisoning causes SIBO across all the papers that have been studied, which is interesting because up until then, we did not have an understanding that the after effects of food poisoning can be so deleterious for our lives. It is not as simple as, you've taken antibiotic, your food poison is gone away, and you're off it. Yeah, at that time, the symptom may be off, but you still have a lingering risk, which is that 70%, which I called earlier, to have issues in the future. All right, so here are some symptoms of SIBO from Dr. Seebecker's website. And the reason I put it here is I feel vindicated, I feel justified from all my learning and my experiences now, because the symptoms that you see here, and the red are the ones that I faced. I have highlighted diabetes in orange because I know it's a big point of interest for the D-Life community as well. These are the, largely the symptoms of SIBO that has been studied. And what's interesting in the next slide is, this is the same slide from the, from the beginning. You'll see pretty much the same, right? And common sense will tell us that something's going on. I mean, it shouldn't take too long for me to figure out that, hey, this could be something to do with the bacteria here. And that's when my eyeballs, opened up. But for the layman, right, like we always want to know what, how do I figure if I have SIBO, or I should even have a leading indicator that it could be SIBO. My suggestion is, and this is also from, one of the websites which I've called at the end, is if you have acute gastroenteritis, food poisoning, and then you have irritating bowel, say 3 weeks after, 4 weeks after, or a month after, you can suspect that you have, a SIBO that is causing your IBS. Improvement after antibiotic treatment. Specifically for me, if I take amoxicillin for cold, my bowel improves for that 2 weeks. Same with ciprofloxacin, right? That's a good indicator. Of course, now in hindsight, I'm able to see that. If your symptoms worsen from probiotic supplements, which also contain prebiotics. So in a lot of the probiotics, you'll see FOS, fructo-oligosaccharides. And if they are in the main part of the nutritional profile, the SIBO person will react. And it does happen with me. So I'm very careful with the probiotics, which I would select. Eating more fiber, we increase the symptoms for some people. Developing constipation after taking painkiller, opiates. And the last one was resonating with me so much, low ferritin and B12 levels. My ferritin was as low as 20 for good 10 years at such a young age. And B12 was always at 200. You take supplements, nothing happens. It doesn't go up because the bacteria is having a party down there. All right, I'll pause a little and check with Sanjay. Hey, Sanjay, anything that's coming to your mind here? Any questions you have?
In this ferritin and B12, what should be the levels which will keep it just above the SIBO?
Yeah, great question. What I would look for from a ferritin perspective is at least above 60. We know that the legendary Dr. P.D. Mangan talks almost at 100 levels. I have gone up to 100, but I'm not able to maintain that. If I have to get to 100, I have to take supplements. But without supplements, just with food, getting to 65 to 75, 80 is totally fine. B12 is a water soluble vitamin. I've read that there are some storage levels, but I've gone up onto 1200 currently. Now right now I'm at around 900 levels, but I would look for anything above 400.
Okay. Yeah, you may continue.
All right. So here is, I think, the most important part of the presentation, which is the discovery that Mark Pimentel has done just a few years back. And this slide is actually 3 months old. So you are getting the latest and greatest in the science of bacterial overgrowth in this podcast. So this is the pathological sequence or the mechanism of SIBO or IBS, right? This is talking about that 70%, which is IBS/SIBO. And what we know today is food poisoning, that acute gastroenteritis, especially E. coli, Campylobacter, and Klebsiella bacteria actually cause SIBO. And what was not known was for a long time was this bottom part, which I have marked. These 3 steps, the step 2, 3, and 4, was not known to us. This was known only last 2 or 3 years ago from the research. But what we knew in history was, as late as about 6, 8, 10 years, was E. coli or food poisoning somewhere is causing bacteria, and there is a breath testing that was discovered by Mark Pimentel and a few others, and some culture and sequencing, and then you figure, oh yeah, there is a overgrowth, let's give antibiotic treatment. But the mechanism was not known, and it is so fascinating that we know the mechanism today, that we can expect something really awesome like a blood test for the or even something around medications in itself. So what is happening basically is these bacterial toxins that these bacteria liberate, when they infect us, any of this, E. coli or Campylobacter, they release a toxin called CDTB. And this CDTB is actually the starting point of anybody getting, SIBO or small intestine bacterial overgrowth, especially the diarrhea type, right? So what essentially happens is this CDTB, when it comes in, I'm going to flip to the next slide. Well, the CDTB toxin is obviously a toxin, so our immune system is there. Remember the 7 steps that we talked about? The immune cells come into action and they release an anti-CDTB antibody towards the toxin. And it's a great protection. But what was discovered as recently is that this anti-CDTB toxin, unfortunately, is due to molecular mimicry, is similar to the vinculin, which is a small nerve tissue that we have in our gut. Really microscopic. I'll show you some images of that, which actually causes the motility of the small intestine, which basically helps us clear the small intestine, either speeds the move of food or slows the move of food. Those nerves are actioned by vinculin in our body. It's a protein, of course, but due to the molecular mimicry, because the anti-CDTB protein is similar to the vinculin protein, vinculin gets alert and causes our immune cells causes anti-vinculin antibodies. So there are 2 antibodies that get secreted, and vinculin basically gets numb. It doesn't get into action, which is, I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunate. It's still a protection mechanism, I would say. And what eventually happens, as you see in this slide, is there is an anti-vinculin protein, and I'll show you some charts around that, which causes the nerve damage. And what that does is it reduces your migrating motor complex, which is basically a cleaning wave. Think of washing machine or a dishwasher in your stomach. So what is fascinating, and I'll show you in the end of my journey, after I watched the Fasting for Survival video from Pradeep Jamnadas, I went cold turkey fast for 24 hours. I never skipped a meal, but I just went cold turkey fasting. And that's now I'm connecting those growling things that you get in the stomach at 6 to 8 hours is basically your migrating motor complex. And there you go. We have too much food around us. We eat too frequently. So even otherwise, forget all of this, we would still be getting SIBO because we are not allowing our migratory motor complex to work. But this essentially says it is a nerve condition. And what happens is, just like, let's say you've left your kitchen sink open and there's some leftover food and something clogs in the bottom, and that water gets stops or blocked, and you come back home after 2 or 3 days, there will be bacteria, there will be gases, smell. The same thing is happening in our small intestine. And then obviously these gases, those gases that are related by these bacteria, can be caught through breath testing, which we don't have in India. Yeah, I do think there are in a couple places, but not very easily available. And you can catch that in breath testing. And then obviously there is a antibiotic treatment, and I'll talk through a little bit about what I've read about natural treatments as well. So that's the thing. CDTB is the elephant in the room. It tricks you into forming antibodies to yourself, to your vinculin. So essentially, what I was suffering from is an autoimmune disorder. Can't imagine, right? Like how things connect one after the other. And usually we think it's if it's an autoimmune, you would have a skin rash, or it will show up out in the outside, but this was all showing up in the inside and with brain fog in my head. Here is a great slide. This talks about the mechanism of SIBO. So just to ground everybody in the science, normal microbiome on the left, Campylobacter E. coli comes in, infected, CDTB toxin gets released by your immune system, which is at the, at your gut lining here in the red ribbon there. Immediately our body creates the antibody against CDTB. And then you'll see, the down in the line graph, anti-CDTB goes up for some time, and then immediately the anti-vinculin. So there is a molecular mimicry taking some time, and the anti-vinculin goes up. And around this point in the last box is when you will see severe symptoms of irritable bowel. So this is, basically the uncovering that Dr. Mark Pimentel did, in some of the lectures that I've heard of him. Here is a beautiful slide of the migrating motor complex, what we call the cleaning waves, after a low dose of erythromycin. So erythromycin in low dose, even aldosterone, act as the prokinetic. Basically, it temporarily stimulates those nerves to work. It's almost like you put a hearing aid when you can't hear and you start hearing, right? It starts working. So those are the cleaning waves caught in electron microscope. I think I'm not very sure. But what's interesting is on the right side, you will see this small picture infographic that I have put. Look at the cleaning waves. So our stomach also has some cleaning waves, but not as much. As you go down in the pyloric valve, you have another bout of cleaning wave. The thinner those yellow waves, stronger those waves are. And in the small intestine, there is action. And these cleaning waves are extremely important for the human body to clean the bacteria, shove it into the ileocecal valve, move it into the large intestine. So some great pictures there. Here is another one from the mass lab imaging, where it talks about the migratory motor complex. And what you see here, I have just highlighted here, the small knots, those are the migratory motor complex, or you can imagine as motors, which actually activate the nerve to connect and take the food along, or the bacteria along, sorry, downstream. And that's what gets impacted when you have SIBO, especially the diary version. This one is a pretty interesting slide. And those of you, I'll leave this for a few minutes. Probably it's hard to pick. I've put the link down there if you want to go and take a look. But on the left side, it's a normal, healthy small intestine microbiome of a person. So, and on the right side is a SIBO-infected microbiome of a person. And what you will notice is on the SIBO person, on the left side, it's totally haywire. These bacteria, the bacteria that is causing SIBO, have taken over this entire city. And what you see there is basically what happens when you have invaders into your city, right? Like nobody wants, all the good people in the town would then go into hiding because they cannot fight a warfare with say machine guns and nuclear weapons. So they go into the hiding, and then everybody else, the external forces take over. That's exactly happening here. Now, know that these bacteria are there in our human body and we can counter most of it, but it's an imbalance, it's a dysbiosis. So it's not about bad or good, it's about the location again. All right, so here is the gas microtyping. I think now we are coming a little bit more to practical on what we can do if we know what gases are present. So just to summarize, the E. coli, Klebsiella are hydrogen producers. If there are chemical possibilities, I don't know the exact mechanics. I'm still reading on that. You can that can transpire into hydrogen sulfide or methane. Now, hydrogen or hydrogen sulfide will cause diarrhea, pain, and urgency, exactly the same symptoms I had. And methane can cause constipation, discomfort, and bloating, which is the other phenotype of SIBO, which is mostly methane. So here is the thing, and this is a beautiful chart, but unfortunately, I have seen only few places in India who can do the lactulose breath test. Currently, this is the gold standard for testing the small intestine bacterial overgrowth, especially the 70% part I'm talking about, right? So you will see how the hydrogen flows up, and it's a 4-hour roughly test, and goes up, and then the methane levels as well. What is important is on the side, the right side, there are some typical expectation that you would look for, and these are all from papers. So in the US, doctors use this while they are talking through to their patients. So you will see that the hydrogen's going up. So this is a hydrogen SIBO. This one's green, methane SIBO, no hydrogen. This one's mixed, both hydrogen and methane, harder to treat. And the down ones are like no noise at all. I mean, all pretty normal. The F1 is somewhere you would want to do a retest. Something's going wrong here because it just drops. So it may be because the previous 30 or the 48 hours, the person would have done some cleansing, would have had a large bout of loose motions, or would have taken some drug. So generally, they would ask you to retest. So this is typically the SIBO breath test, that is available. All right. I'll go summarize this quickly for us, and then I'll pause for any questions. So basically, SIBO, what we talked about is on the right side, which is mostly to do with the motility of the gut. And we didn't talk about that rest 30%. So the rest 30% comes from the left side. It could be surgery, additions, hard impacts in the abdomen. It can be malnutrition as well, right? So there are many other cases for which what I talked through does not apply. But if the 70% of the cases is to do with fermentable carbohydrates creating gas, and then obviously that causes food sensitivities, headaches, joint pain, leaky gut. So my hypothesis is that brain fog that I used to get is a potential leaky gut. And there is actually a protein, again, we don't have that in India, called zonulin, which you can actually test, just like you test for CDTB or vinculin. If you can test for zonulin, then you probably can arrive at some leaky gut kind of a scenario. And eventually that leads to, asthma, depression, anxiety. So these are all the associated conditions that SIBO can cause. In fact, SIBO is associated with endometriosis, hypothyroidism, significant weight loss if you have the diarrhea version, depression, anxiety. Obviously, we know serotonin, a large part gut has a role to play. Autism too, is associated with small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So in summary, guys, if you want to take one thing, next time you have a bloated stomach and you're coming out of a food poisoning, think SIBO, especially diarrhea. And the bottom line is the bacteria CDTB release toxins. We produce an antibody CDTB that is molecular mimicry to vinculin. So anti-vinculin antibody comes into play and damages the migratory motor complex. So in summary, IBO is commonly a small bowel microbiome disease. It's not in the head, at least for 70% of the cases. SIBO is an important contributor to IBS. Those are the two bacteria that I talked about. Methane is associated in constipation. So if it is constipation, think methane. Obviously, there are associated conditions like thyroid that you can also think of. A lot of research is being done on hydrogen sulfide currently, which is the key to understanding and closing this entire loop. Today, we don't have a hydrogen sulfide test commercially available even in the US from what I've learned. And the CDTB we already talked about. And what is interesting is this paper and the YouTube video clearly says IBS is an organic disease, and you can have biomarkers with anti-CDTB, anti-vinculin in your blood. So in the US, and I do plan to see if I can do that next time I'm there, is there is a blood test called anti-CD/TB and anti-vinculin. It is called IBS Smart. It was invented by Dr. Mark Pimentel, sorry, and that's available. So I'm excited to see when that can come to India, so it can help all our countrymen here. So yeah, that's in summary the mechanics and the science of SIBO. And I'll probably go to the next part around some of the treatment or protocols I have learned. But I'll pause for Sanjay for any questions you have, Sanjay.
As of now, no, I will have it later about the low FODMAP stuff.
All right.
Because you had covered FODMAP as one of the options.
Yeah, so we can talk about that. That was my first trial with my SIBO. So here is the thing, right? I'm a huge fan of application, even little knowledge, but if you can apply all of it, that is still something to cherish. So I do want to bring some of the tools for healing SIBO from what I have learned. I have put all the articles I have read, down below for us to go. So this is none of my inventing. So the first thing you can do, if you are diagnosed with SIBO, that is, if you are able to get a SIBO breath test, great. If you're able to get an anti-CD/TB, anti-vinculin test, from the other countries, it's a blood test, great. But if, let's say, you're in a remote village in India or anywhere in India, because the access to blood testing is very hard for SIBO today, the first thing I would advise is you go on a low FODMAP diet. FODMAP is basically a class of carbohydrates. It is fructo, oligo, di, mono, saccharides, and polyols. So it's a type of carbohydrates that are present in the larger carbohydrate family, which is easy to ferment for the bacteria. And I'll take you through some slides around what a typical low FODMAP diet may look like. But basically, what you're trying to do is you eat protein, you won't get the fermentation. You eat fats, you won't get the fermentation. But when you eat the carbs, especially the high FODMAP, the bacteria loves it. And usually high FODMAP is the slower digesting, higher fiber carbohydrate. So it's such a conundrum, and I feel really sorry for the state, because especially when you're a diabetic, and let's say you don't have SIBO, but you're diabetic, we would love for the person to eat, non-starchy vegetables, of course, go grain-free, sugar-free. But what can happen is if you eat the cruciferous vegetables, which are higher in fiber, many of them are high FODMAP, and that can cause fermentation. And then it causes a vicious circle for the person, because then that causes malnutrition. You're not able to absorb. Typically, my story of how I lost weight. So it is important to do a low FODMAP trial for at least 2 weeks. You will immediately know if there is an improvement. I've put some links there about what a low FODMAP diet looks like, and I'll take you through that at the end. Another version is called low fermentation eating. This is from Dr. Pimentel himself. So there is a paper on that that is available in Google for everybody to read. But basically, what we are trying to do is eliminate some of the carbs that the bacteria loves. The second part of the tool is what you can do beyond your diet, right? So like I said, a lot of times your low stomach acid might have caused your SIBO. And this may be because the bacteria could not be fried in your stomach acid, although it was a poisoned food. We eat poisoned food all the time, but we get food poisoning only sometimes. So because we have that protection, so you can start from the top with betaine HCl supplements. You can do apple cider vinegar, empty stomach in the morning with salt. That's something I do every day today. You can also take some digestive enzymes. I was given digestive enzymes. It worked for me for 3-4 months, but it was still not, containing the bacteria, because I was still eating high FODMAP diet. So the bacteria, although they were diving, they were making their kids and thriving, and more bacteria was forming. So the digestive enzyme didn't help me to kind of put it into remission. You can use activated charcoal for temporarily bloating relief. You get the tablets. Probiotics, something that worked for me. Dr. Michael Risoyo has innumerable papers around the effect of probiotics on SIBO, which may sound counterintuitive, right? Like you have a bacterial overgrowth, so you're going to adding more probiotic, but it's fascinating how the science works. You can use colostrum, osmotic laxatives like magnesium citrate for getting a relief from the IBS constipation type. Obviously, castor oil, sometimes works. And ICV massage is ileocecal wall massage. So you go down to your right pelvic bone, just below the rib cage. This is available in YouTube. You can type ileocecal wall massage and do a anti-clockwise massage with your leg straight and toe, moving to the right. And that opens the ileocecal wall for especially the constipation type. It's an interesting one. I've tried this with a couple of relatives and friends. It gives them a relief. But I think the biggest question for everybody is, how do I kill the bacteria? Right? There are herbal antimicrobials that you can use. There are pharmacological interventions. Largely rifaximin is the antibiotic that is used in the market for IBS D. And if you have IBS C, rifaximin in combination with uh, neomycin as a combo is used for the IBS or the SIBO constipation type. The herbal antimicrobials is interesting because it's all available in our kitchen, Sanjay. These are,
Okay.
not too far away from us. So, and we use that in our food. It's just that we have to be using it in higher doses. So, an example for a herbal antimicrobial is, berberine is a herbal antimicrobial. We use that quite a bit in many different applications. And berberine combined with neem, oregano oil are some of the options that are available. I won't go into the detail, but that's available in Dr. Alison Seeberger's website. And usually use that in combination. So berberine, allicin, berberine, neem, berberine, oregano oil, and these are all available in capsule forms. Of course, the pharmacological ones I already talked about, which is rifaximin or rifaximin plus neomycin if you're the constipation type. And then the last one, which has actually some 90% of healing rate, is the elemental diet. And it is basically a concoction of a drink. I have not been able to find it in Amazon in India, but it's basically in the purified form. It will purify into the individual amino acids. So it is obviously a factory made product. You can make it at home apparently. And it's a drink that you take for 2 weeks. And this has seen the highest remission of SIBO. What you see in green font is what I have tried for my remission. What you see in orange is what I was given. And I do want to try, try the prokinetics, which we will talk about a little bit. But that's generally the bacteria killing process. And the relapsing is very interesting. If you see all of this, we come back to a low carb lifestyle. So if we can keep our carbs low, you will see relief. If you take probiotics regularly, you will see relief. Intermittent fasting will help you with your migratory motor complex. So it's all in our control, right? I mean, you don't really need the herbal antimicrobials. In fact, what I did was I killed the bacteria last. I did herbal antimicrobials last. I did the probiotics. I did the low carb lifestyle, intermittent fasting, then a round of herbal antimicrobials. And I'm looking forward to do one more. But this is generally the protocol that is forward. Here is a slide, basically the same previous slide in terms of how to go around, the protocol that you can see right here in the slide. And to the end, I know there's a lot of questions on probiotics, because we get very passionate with probiotics. So, yogurt, kefir, all of that. Dr. Michael Riccio has put a lot of papers in his website around how to use probiotics. And his suggestion has been a three-legged stool. Use all three probiotics: lacto-bifido blend, Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a yeast, a friendly yeast, and the soil-based probiotic, which is called spore-based probiotic. We use that in combination in the protocol that I talked about previously. Just a call out that from Mark Pimentel and Dr. Alison Seeberger's protocol, probiotics does not come into play. But what I found is, for me, everybody's gut microbiome is different. Probiotics did help me a lot. Does it heal me fully? No. You still need the low carb lifestyle. You still need the intermittent fasting, but it does work quite fascinatingly. Okay. All right. So I promised I will fill the last three pillars of the slide in the beginning. So here is the missing element. So 2021, I talked to you about the video on fasting for survival lecture. I went cold turkey, 24 hours water fast. It was really hard. Never missed a single meal. Usually I used to eat 3 meals, even 4 meals, because I was pretty lean. And what I thought is, hey, I need to eat more to gain weight and put muscle. Little did I know the bacteria was having a party in my intestines there. And then obviously the IBS flare-ups reduced significantly just with that 124-hour fast. I saw a significant improvement. Of course, I was younger, so obviously I had more wherewithal to come back. I immediately took a premium for YouTube and did my low FODMAP experiments. And what I realized, Sanjay, is it is all to do with carboholism. You reduce your carbohydrates, and in the SIBO context, you go low FODMAP, you will feel better, right? At least temporarily. As simple as that. For me, nuts, legumes, are a huge problem. Nuts in too much quantity causes me flare-ups. Legumes are almost a no-no. Milk is almost a no-no. So you need to find out what works for you. And experiment is the best way for us to know. And of course, 2022, I came across the fascinating D-Life platform. Mr. Anup Singh talked about the lower than 100 grams total. So I did 2 weeks, less than 100 gram, felt better. I did another 2 weeks, less than 75, felt better. Another 50, another 25. Almost, if I'm below 20 grams, I feel amazing. Obviously, it's a control mechanism. It is not healing. And then I started reading a lot more and came across in 2023, just recently in the last 6-7 months, across all the SIBO protocols, and then self-diagnosed myself as hydrogen and with a mild leaky gut because I had this brain fog constantly. Went through the probiotics protocol that Dr. Rishia talks about, went through the SIBO herbal antimicrobial protocol, and many of these herbal protocols are available in Amazon. India is a great place from a natural protocol therapy, thanks to our Ayurveda way of living. And then I implemented a gut repair protocol as well once the SIBO got better, which is to do usually with L-glutamine, licorice, slippery elm. And then today, I'm happy to say I'm probably at around that 80 to 90% SIBO remission. I do have flare-ups, so I do carry the Kali bike medicine that my brother provided me. But I know immediately I have a food journal, and I always journal it in my phone. And when you're off legumes, off whole milk, and some of the things that that causes flare-up, you will be able to attack it much better. And I do plan to go another round of herbal antimicrobials in the coming months. And there are two books that if you want to read, those really changed my life, and that's pretty much my gut-wrenching story, for the audience here. Here is a little before and after. I was never a fat kid, but I was very interested in being broad and muscular. Never happened, and it took me up to almost last year, I think, to put on some weight. So I went from 58 to 63. Note that my waist reduced from good 31 inches to 29. So and then what you would try to say, all guys who like to have the V-shaped body. So I'm trying hard to get there, but more importantly, the trigs dropped to 40, HDL went up, which is a great sign of a marker. And ferritin has gone up, B12 has gone up, which means I am getting control on my on the small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And you can see that, you can feel it, you can almost feel it. People will tell you, hey, you look better, you look fresher. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share about my journey and the small self-case study. All right, Sanjay, over to you.
These are the references. I think people can take a photograph of all the websites that he has referred to. So one thing is there. You said you'd gone down to 25 grams of low carbs. So for a regular vegetarian, that must be very, very difficult.
Yeah, it is hard. It is hard because one, it is not about India being primarily a vegetarian society. It's also about during that age from 20 to 40, you're also usually working, traveling, you don't have so much control on what you want on the table. So it was hard, right? But thankfully, what I used to do is I used to be very aware, right? So even if there is something that will flare me up, I would have it in small quantities. So I'll bring up one slide here, and that will tell you a few things about what that looks like. So this is the high FODMAP foods, for example, here. And what you see here is up to certain amount, 2 tablespoons, 1 cup, you'll still be okay. It's sometimes the quantity, right? So I would be very conscious to say, oh, there are legumes on the table. Okay, what legume that is? Okay, this is the amount I can have, right? Or I would just fast. In the last 3 years, that's what I do. If I'm traveling, I would just fast. If I'm traveling to another country, I would just fast, even if it is 24 hours in the flight. Right. So once you know the science, I think you are more enticed to follow what works for you because you know the evidence. So it is hard, Sanjay, but I think if there is a way, if you can actually figure out what works for you.
Another point was you said cruciferous vegetables can flare up SIBO. Is that in raw form, cooked form, or any form?
Great question. It's usually in the raw form. So salads. So if you see in my first slide, salads gets me bloated.
Yeah.
Raw seeds get me bloated, but if I pan roast them, I feel better. Right. So salads will cause you some bloating. Right. Now, however, that's why this IBS and SIBO is so complicated because our microbiomes are so different. What bloats for me may not bloat for you. Right?
Yeah.
Because the constituent of our microbiome can be different. So here there are so many low food vegetables on the left side that you can still consume and be fine. But there could be cases where one of these may not work for me. But generally everything may work. But obviously this is from Dr. Nicole Dineza. She's a very popular YouTuber on gut related topics. And that's what she talks about, right? What works for you may not work for me. But if we don't fear experiments, you will find success.
So essentially, raw food is a danger sign.
Yeah, if you have the SIBO in your stomach, raw food could be hard. The other part is, raw food are also going to have some bacteria in it. So if
Yes.
you don't have SIBO, raw food, especially eaten from outside, can be the cause for your food poisoning, the anti-CD/TB
Yes.
antibody, and all the vicious cycle that starts with.
So, okay, this low carb and low FODMAP, is there too much of a difference, or it's just one part of one kind of low carb?
Great question. So I'd say low FODMAP and low carb are similar in the sense that both are talking about carbohydrates.
Yes.
Right? That's where the similarity ends, though. When you say low carb, you generally look for less than 100 grams, less than 50 grams, 25 if you're doing a keto. But when it comes to a low FODMAP, it's interesting because sucrose, is low FODMAP food. Rice
Okay.
is low FODMAP food because it is quickly going to be absorbed. Wheat,
Okay.
rye, barley are high FODMAP foods. So there is a
Okay.
distinction, right? So if you're looking at, remitting your diabetes, losing weight, you generally have to be low carb, whether it is low FODMAP, high FODMAP doesn't matter. You need to be low carb. But if it is about SIBO, then it is about low FODMAP. In my view, why all this fuss? Just go low carb.
Yeah.
Right? Just go low carb, do no grain, no pain, no whole milk because lactose is still a fermentable, high FODMAP food item, right? And then just work on the low carb protocol that you have. Add some of the low FODMAP vegetables from that list, right?
Okay.
And you just
Okay.
Google low FODMAP foods, you will get low FODMAP is not a new concept. It's been there since the 80s and 90s.
Okay. I think we can open for questions from people.
Okay, I think I see a question on can rice be eaten? What if somebody gets hungry even after eating a high protein diet? So here is the interesting thing. If you have a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, you probably will have a very poor appetite and also a very variable appetite. You may be hungry one day in the morning, but not in the next morning. You may be hungry in the evening, another next morning, you may not be hungry. Yeah, rice can be eaten. In fact, what has been written in the low fermentation diet by Mark Pimentel is rice is a grain that you can consume. Rice and millets and quinoa is what I see in his list. So you can consume. But here is the thing, right? Like if you are diabetic, then you should just go low carb. It's as simple as that, right? Or keto. no fuss at all. But if you're not diabetic and your first goal is to heal SIBO, you can have rice because it is a low FODMAP grade.
Basically, a low carb diet is a cure-all for most things.
Absolutely. It avoids us doing any over engineering, thinking too much. Oh, is this low FODMAP? All of that, right? Because low FODMAP is a carbohydrate, so you can as well just say low carb and move on.
Are there any more questions, or
Sir,
we can come?
I have one question. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
please.
Actually, this IBS is a psychosomatic disease. So along with the dietary modification, so we need to do any lifestyle modification like meditation or physical exercise or anything else to come to the remission stage.
Yeah, so good question. So 70% of IBS, as per the data, is not a psychosomatic disease. It is a microbial disorder. I just want to make that clear, right? So the remaining 30%, some part of that 30% could be psychosomatic, right? So obviously, from a SIBO perspective, if it is coming from food poisoning, which is the large part of what I spoke about, the lifestyle changes are hard to do because you don't know when your flare-up will come. So the first thing to do is to make sure that the protocol I said, right, low FODMAP is the first thing to do, and then try to induce more, interventions with regards to exercise. What I saw is, for me personally, lifting weights and aerobic exercises actually helped my SIBO a lot. I don't know why. I don't know the science behind it. So you'll have to figure out what lifestyle, factors you want to sort of change. The other part I want to highlight is there will be a lot of fatigue if you do, and it will exacerbate your IBS and SIBO if you don't sleep well. So night shifts, example, I have seen, this is very observational. A lot of my friends with night shifts actually have SIBO. I don't know how, but it's probably to do with the circadian rhythm. So I'd say, yeah, lifestyle is important, but at the same time, it is a microbial dysbiosis 70% of the time, not a psychometric disease. And in fact, it's not a disease, it's a syndrome. So it's a constellation of symptoms.
Yeah.
I have some people link IBS with stress. Whenever they have a crunch situation, their bowel movement gets disturbed. Is it so? Is it related with the stress?
Yeah. So, we do have the enteric nervous system, right? The gut-brain axis. So I'm not denying that stress will cause IBS. Yes, it will cause IBS. That's the other 30% part. All of that comes, right? Hypothyroidism, additions, surgery, opiates, medications, heavy stress, frequent stress. Obviously, your rest and digest, flight and fight go together, right? Your cortisol is elevated all the time. You're not able to rest and digest. So there is a link between the gut brain axis, certainly, and that can trigger your irritable bowel syndrome. But again, that is the 30% part of the pie. 70% is still food poisoning and the anti-CDTB, anti-vinculin antibody coming into play.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
I think there's one which I can see of. I go off carb for a few days and later I go back to carb diet. When I go off carb, those few days, I get loose motions soon after a meal. That's a hard one. I don't know. When you go off carbs when you go off carb, you say you get loose motions. I don't know. What you may want to do is go on a low FODMAP diet and start making a food journal and start writing down things. There could be some food intolerances that you may be having in the food that you're taking, even when you're going off carb. So, for example, a lot of people who are off carb would consume dairy, and some are have intolerances to dairy. So, dairy, gluten are some intolerances. It's easy to leave gluten, but hard to leave dairy, especially in our Indian subcontinent. So that's something you may want to think of. Hard to comment unless I am able to get the full picture. All right, Sanjay, over to you.
Okay, any more questions?
I have one more query.
Okay, please go
Whenever
ahead.
it's related to me, I am basically on low carb and I'm 90% carnivore. But whenever I consume carbs, suddenly the very next day, I start bloating and the whole system disturbs. I have to go to the washroom again and again, and then it takes around 8 to 10 hours to settle down. Is it something related to my gut biome?
We have some carnivore experts here, so you can, definitely reach out to Ira, Vineet and others in the D-Life group. But what I can say from my experience is, there could be an H. pylori case, which has a lot of biofilm secretions. So you can look up H. pylori. That's a possible point to understand. And also, you may be having a low-grade SIBO. And the carnivore diet may be actually be helping you. But Ira Saha is on our group here if you want to answer that, Ira.
Sandesh, can I add something to this?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. See, Dr. Arvind, I don't think so that you have anything kind of H. pylori or SIBO because you are on a carnivore and you are well able to digest the protein. Like people who are having any kind of H. pylori or bacteria in the upper gut, especially in their stomach, they won't be able to digest any protein. Okay. And it's because you are on a carnivore. What is happening is most of the time you're on a carnivore, and whenever you go on like start to add some kind of vegetables or some carbs in any form, so all the carbs, they have some kind of undigestible particles. Okay, that's why the FODMAP things come in, like because the FODMAP means more undigestible particles. And the people who are already having SIBO or IBS, what is happening? Their gut is already inflamed. Otherwise, for a healthy gut, they can easily manage with these undigestible particles because there are some bacteria that can help them to digest, or like they are having a good intestinal motility that the bacteria, all the undigestible particles, they move to the colon. But in your case, the thing is because most of the time you're on a carnivore, and the once if you add, you will definitely see some symptoms. Okay. And you can see like if you add some carbs which are easily digested and have less undigestible particle, you won't feel bloated. Okay.
Got it.
Can I just ask
Thanks,
a question,
Dr. Kaur.
Sandesh? Hi,
Yeah,
Sandesh.
please.
Sandesh, a while back, this is going back about 3-4 years now, I knew somebody who suffered from IBS. And every time he went to the doctors, he was not given any of this, the kind of information that you've been imparting today. None of this came from his doctor. He was literally put on antidepressants, and told to go and take it easy. But his IBS didn't disappear. So what I'm asking and what I'm wondering is how available is the information that you have, which is obviously something that you have researched because you are suffering from this problem. How much of this information is actually available with the conventional medicine doctors? First question.
Yeah, great one. Yeah, it's a tricky one. It depends on a lot of factors, right? If you ask me, it's not available so much in the medical literature today because some of the things that I shared is as recent as published 3 months back. Is it, to your question, is it available? No. But does it stop us to research, take these papers to a doctor and have an educated conversation? Great. And the way I would approach it is I would love to have a doctor who's a coach first and a doctor less, and have that conversation. So I would take these papers with him to say, hey, here is what I read. I know I'm taking these antidepressants, but it looks like there are some more research that has come in. Unfortunately, that's the only thing I can think of what we can do. And just take these. And in YouTube, the best way to search in YouTube is, instead of searching in Google, do the same search in YouTube, and you'll get all these lectures. And what's depressing is that there are barely any views on these videos. Like Dr. Mark Pimentel's videos, I don't see a lot of views, although they are super researchers. And I would wish, all our doctor community could, take a read at it. And my learning is still, pretty novice. I'm sure there are a lot of, intricacies in this. But Sneha, I know, yeah, it's unfortunate it's not there, but it shouldn't stop us from having that good conversation with the evidence that we take to our doctor.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, but you're confirming what I was actually thinking, because even when this person was going to the doctor with their IBS problems, you know, the information or the I mean, the treatment part was one thing, antidepressant, but why he was actually suffering from this IBS, you know, that there was nothing there. There was no reason given to him as to why this condition existed. You know, if you have the flu, you don't just get given paracetamol. You know, you're told, you know, your chest is bad, that's why you're coughing. You know, you've got a runny nose. You know, I mean, there are symptoms of this flu discussed with you, but for him. And I was very intrigued by this whole thing that was taking place in his body. But every time, you know, it was the same story. Just take these antidepressants. Okay, so you have gained a lot of knowledge in this field. Are you able to treat other people with your knowledge now?
Yeah, I mean, mostly it's family, and friends. We try to help the community, right? Like this is a very complicated subject because everybody's microbiome is so different. But if someone is willing to try, I do help them. I do help them as a coach, being more as a friend and not obviously as a doctor because I'm not qualified. But I bring them the papers together and we have a conversation. So I have had successes. And incidentally, a couple of my cousins who are in the US have seen successes with a lot of the digestive disorders, also in my, friends and family, as well. And Sneh, back to your question, the first question, right? So the anti-CDTB, anti-vinculin antibody blood test is available in the US. However, it just came in, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago through the IBS Smart kit, right? I think, but unfortunately, I think the mainstream is not caught up in all these conferences and media and papers that are already published. So, and the breath test has been there even before that, almost, I think, 8 to 9 years back. And I do see that a few in some of our metro cities in India, although it's quite expensive. It's there, but I think it's about, the saying, right? Leaders are readers. So you have to be a reader to be a leader in that subject. And you need to keep catch up because science keeps, moving forward. Unfortunately, we need to keep up to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was just wondering if you are treating people, you know, how people react to the kind of information that you're giving them, because it's quite kind of sciencey based, right? How much of this knowledge do you give them to kind of make them feel comfortable with the treatment of their IBS? You know, it's for somebody who doesn't know biology and who doesn't know how their body works or where their organs are, you know, how do you even begin to explain something like this?
Yeah, simple. I'm not a science like a pure science student. I'm actually an engineer in electronics and communication. So the first part is that if you know to read English and make sense of connecting dots, you can figure things out with the amount of software that has penetrated and Google that is available for us, right? The second part is educate people on the science and try to make it as simple as possible, right? So what I tell them is, as laymanish, I try to go mostly to the Paleolithic time and tell a story of how, we've evolved. And if you look at all the things that I told you, perhaps humans are designed to be low carb in the first place itself, right? Keep all of this aside, but if a low FODMAP diet works, if a low carb diet works, does it probably it means that our genes have not moved as fast as the lifestyle changes and the new food pattern changes that we've had? And then they start thinking, right? and I
Yeah.
let them go back home and come back after 2 days and have that debate again. And the other part is setting expectations, is about, hey, this takes time. Here is the science. And if they're convinced on the science, like when I talked about the fasting for survival lecture, someone who's never fast has been a foodie all the time. In fact, my fellow office people used to call me a bottomless pit. Little did I know that itself was the issue, right? So I think talking through the science works well. What's fascinating even more, and in fact funny, is kids get this earlier than adults because they love science. So as long as you're talking evidence, giving some visuals, and that's the reason I bought some visuals today. There is a lot of convincing people out there needing help, and it's about that, and you do your best effort.
Yeah, no, very good. I mean, really excellent. It was very user friendly, the way you laid the whole thing out, and the way you imparted the information step by step. It was just exceptional, and I was able to understand all of it. And yes, another look at it, and I can probably try and help or give some knowledge to people with IBS, and certainly the person who's been suffering from IBS for all these years now. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
I think we can come to the close this session. Thank you very much, Sandesh. It was a very exhaustive, very informative, and I think everybody would have understood what exactly you were putting across and now are more enlightened. Thank you very much. I think we can stop the recording.
Thank you, Sanjay, and thanks, T-Life, for the opportunity.